Episode 14, we have Saskia. Might let you pronounce it.
Groen-in't-Woud.
Thank you for coming on today. I've
Thank
had the
you.
pleasure of meeting you this week. And what I've known is obviously, I think the old boy said, "Oh, have you met Saskia yet?" This is early in the competition. I was like, "No, not yet. Like, who's Saskia?" And then obviously, you gave me a bit of a story. I was like, "Right." And then as I've got to know you, you've told me a little bit about yourself and you've achieved quite a lot, you could say. Being CEO of many international companies, Damco is probably the major one,
Yeah.
would say? Damco Solutions,
Damco Freight Forwarding, but
freight
yeah,
forwarding.
it is a
Okay.
solutions. Yeah.
And what else have you done in your career?
Yeah, so I'm a Gladstone girl, proud Gladstone girl, and grew up in industry. And I think it gives you a really big head start in life.
Mm,
So I started in alumina refining at QAL and then went to the construction of Yarwun. So I was the sixth person on site when it was still covered in trees and koalas and stuff, which was really, really interesting. And through that, we needed cement. Well, we needed lime for the alumina refining process. And the Cement Australia had an old mothballed cement kiln. So we started talking to them at the time about turning that into a lime kiln. And Cement Australia said, "Well, do you want to come and do the project?" And I thought, well, why not? So we went and did all the stakeholder management and then into the broader approvals and everything for the project. Through that, I got to meet the executive member for Oceania from Wholesome in Switzerland, a guy called Tom Clough, and then through other contacts, ended up with a job in Switzerland,
yeah, wow.
as you do.
Yeah.
So packed my very very small children up, jumped on a plane, and 48 hours later, you wake up in a country you know nothing about,
Mm.
and away you go. And then I think since then I've worked in 70 something countries. I think it's 74, something like that. Anyway, yeah, a lot of them, a lot of time. So you start to get, you start to get a bit familiar with weird places.
It's something very few people can say that they've traveled even 20 countries, let alone 74 for
Mm.
your work, which you could say is definitely your passion. You work a job that you love.
Yeah, that's correct. I've been really lucky, and I think for I had a I've had some really good mentors around me that always said, "Do a good job today, and tomorrow just takes care of
Mm.
itself." So I've never gone into anything with a particular plan, more a process of saying, "Okay, that's an opportunity. I'll put my hand up for it." It's not without its challenges. I've had many 1 o'clock in the morning on the bathroom floor in tears trying to work out what I'm going to do next. It's tough, and obviously, like anywhere, the higher up you go, the harder it gets. But so are the rewards. So yeah, so by the time I left Wholesome, so I was living and working in the Philippines at that point, and it's the Wild West. Some of the best people in the world,
Wow.
but it's a bit batshit crazy on days.
Yep.
So got some good war stories from Philippines. And then I went to Singapore with Maersk. So Thomas Reba Knudsen, who's now the chair globally for Toll, was my boss there. He was an amazing guy and just opened up just tremendous opportunities for
So
me.
a massive mentor in your life.
Very much. Thomas is, I have to say, he's a terrific person, very principled, really good values, and understands just the strengths of what you can achieve by getting people to bring their best to work every day
Mm.
in fairly complex operating environments. So I learned a lot, and then went over to Europe as the COO, and then got a phone call when I was on holiday saying, "Do you want to do the CEO role?" And don't ever ask what that could be because you won't do it. So
Right.
went into that job thinking, "Wow!" And it honestly, it was amazing. So,
Like you said, you were born and raised in Gladstone,
mm.
Dutch family,
Yep,
as you can tell by the last name.
yep,
It's very funny because a lot of European families actually don't keep their last name. I know our family ourselves changed it because of World War II.
mm.
Being German, we were put on the picture like we're Nazis, even though we had nothing to do with it. So a lot of European families I know have went for a more simple last name anyway. But
Yeah.
your family has stuck with yours.
Well, there's a little bit of a story there. I actually thought my name was Greenwood until I was in high school, and I went to do my junior certificate, and mum, mum and dad said, "Oh, by the way, here's your actual name." And that when they're going to tell you that, you think, "Oh, am I adopted?" Turns out no. So yeah, and back then you filled in forms. We had to colour in little circles per letter, and there just simply wasn't even enough space on the page to fit all my bits and pieces in for my last name. And I have a very good friend here, Silka Churacek, and Silka and I were at school together. And I do remember our first day of school where we were in the same form class, and we had a new teacher, and they write your name down for the role. And she'd just got through, I think she'd just got through my name, and then she wanted Silka's name, and she just thought we were having a go. We're like, no, no, this is really our names. But a lot of people did anglicize it, and I can assure you, the last country I lived in was the Netherlands, and they have definitely not forgiven the Germans for stealing all the bicycles at the end of World War II.
Oh, right.
It's still a thing.
True.
Yep.
Yeah,
So,
right. So, like, you're the eldest of three.
I am. Yep.
So, and your family started multi-trade, which is
Yes.
a mining, is it mining you supply to mine sites, mining
Yeah,
companies?
so Multitrade actually started off as an electrical contracting company. And then over the years, Dad was really good at kind of reading the market. And Mum was very good at keeping Dad on the straight and narrow. I think
Mm,
Dad had many ideas, but Mum was the one that was able to help pick through those and know which ones would work. And over time, it became a kind of a civil installation company. And then about 25 years ago, Dad saw an opportunity for the transportable buildings, so all the mining camps that go in.
yep.
So began supplying those, and then sort of realized, well, if I'm going to supply them, I may as well manufacture them. So there's also a manufacturing
Okay.
business. Yeah.
Yep. So, I remember I was reading your article that was done in the CEO magazine, and it mentions how you were on the mine site as early as the age of 6. So you could say
Yeah.
that's
Oh, so
you.
if Dad was, my poor old dad passed away 10 years ago, but I think if he was alive now, he'd probably get some questions. So he used to take me up, pick me up from school, and we would go up the mines for 3 or 4 days. And I can remember Glendon before it was even built. So I was 6, and Dad was up there for the first of the civils. And I got left in a donga with an Italian guy that spoke no English but made great pasta. I remember sitting there as a 6-year-old, and you got to remember you had a colouring in book.
Mm,
We had no digital anything
no.
back then. And Dad was gone for, I don't know, 7 or 8 hours, and back he came. And, and we did that often. And it was great. And he used to take me up the silos that are down at the waterfront here at Auckland
Okay.
Point.
Yep.
Yeah, so Dad was involved in that project. So as a very, very little girl, I got to go to the top of those silos while they were under construction. So it probably, does lead you into an industrial career, I'd say.
Yep.
Mm.
So, like going through high school, did you always had your mind set on potentially being a CEO one day, or
No. I think like many people, and I think I think the pressures then were different. You need to just go and do something that was, where you were gainfully employed. I always loved writing, and my career I started actually in marketing and economics, and I wanted to be an engineer. And Dad sort of was more of the view that the world has many engineers, but they're not particularly good communicators, and to develop communication strengths, which
yep.
actually, in hindsight, was very good advice. No, I don't think I ever really knew what I wanted to do. I worked for the National Australia Bank for a while, and then ended up more back in industry and, on the stakeholder management side, which I loved, working between government, local community bodies, actually, what we were doing from an engineering perspective. I don't think I really ever had a view that it would go as far as it did. So go figure. It was more, just taking opportunities as they came, and that's where the road led.
Yep.
Mm.
So going back to you were saying it was the Yarwun site before it got built when it was
Mm,
still, and
mm.
then you've been asked to go to Switzerland. Did you feel like you were in the deep end? You're like, holy shit, like,
Oh, completely.
yeah,
And oh gosh, I remember, getting to Switzerland. Saxon was a baby, Flynn was a toddler, and we arrived, this was in 2008, and it's just everything is different, and it's fine, and you have to learn to cope with that. And one of the worst things that ever happened to me very early, my arrival actually unfortunately coincided with a lot of Swiss people being laid off. So they were looking to bring in a different talent base and try and, take the company to be a more global company at the time. And my husband at the time was taking the kids through Zurich station. So for those of you who've been in Zurich, it's massive. It's 3 levels. It's a
Mm.
very big place. And I hope he doesn't kill me for telling this story, but he lost the kids and he rang me at work and he goes, "Oh my God, I've lost the kids." And so, of course, you go into immediate panic. We'd only been there for about a week and I didn't know anyone. You don't know who to call. You don't have any friends. You don't know anyone. And I was really upset and very panicked. And this girl walked in, and it's in Switzerland at the time. It's really improved a lot, but you didn't work as a mother. So the people that were in work as women were tended to be younger women or older women. And this young girl came in, and this is a very formative part of my life actually. And she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No, this has just happened. I don't know what to do." And she said, "Well, you should take this as a sign you're not welcome here and go home."
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. And I remember walking back into my office and sitting on the floor, just a cataclysmic wreck. And Bevan found the kids then, which was great, and he's been a great dad. But it was just one of those moments that you go, right, what am I going to do? Am I going home, or am I going to make this work? And yeah, so I made it work.
Yep. I guess, like, how was it going into more detail about, like, just going straight to Switzerland, new environment in every way possible, language, food.
Yeah.
Um, would you say the climate can be quite similar to parts of Australia?
No,
No, completely different?
no. We had months where you have no sun. So Switzerland's in a bowl. So we used to take the reason everyone skis. You go up to the mountains to get the sun. I think you have to accept, and this goes for anything in life. You have to accept you are where you are, and
Mm.
the question is, what are you going to do about it? And everything was different, but we chose to say, okay, let's embrace it. Let's become part of it. My kids went to a local Swiss school. They spoke fluent Swiss German from a very young age,
Oh, that's awesome.
to the point where their teacher didn't realize we were an expatriate family. And
Cool.
then she said to me about 6 months later, after she realized, that we were, she said, "Oh, I can hear Flynn's Aussie drawl now." And I was like, my son does not have a drawl. And I rang home one day and Flynn answered the phone. He goes, "Hello." And I'm like, "Oh, there it is."
Yeah,
So, no, but we really chose to embrace it. They're very good, with food, for example. So the food
yeah.
is seasonal. So if you're going to eat asparagus, which is Spargel in Swiss German, you only eat it during asparagus season. But you can expect that every single thing on the menu has an asparagus base.
Right.
And then you'll go into the next season. So really fantastic. And they move through the seasons very well.
Mm.
As Aussies, we did summer fantastically. We still had, even 4 or 5 years after being there, we were still trying to work out how to dress for winter. We had one winter that was -30, and I got a phone call from Saxon. So kids walk to school by themselves at 4. So if you walk your kids to school, you're seen as being a bit crazy.
Yeah, wow.
So the kids are very much independent, and you live quite close to the kindergarten. And Saxon hadn't turned up, and neither had one of his little friends. And he was only 4 at the time. And he was on a frozen canal wondering where the ducks went when it got cold. So, the kids were also encouraged to be outdoors. So they have Waldtag, which is Forest Day. Every Wednesday was Waldtag. And it doesn't matter if it is pouring with rain, if it's snow, if it's sunshine, they go to the forest and they cook their lunch on an open fire. Imagine that.
Imagine that.
Imagine that.
You would say that Switzerland is probably one of the most safer countries in the world.
Yeah.
So being able to do that, you can understand. Well, you can't. It's still your 4-year-old walking to school seems a bit crazy to some
Does
degree.
to us, doesn't
Mm,
to them.
yeah,
That's,
just
and
natural.
yeah, and I think if you ask my children now, they're young adults now, they loved it. They used to ride a sled to school in winter. How cool is that?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so yeah.
I guess, like, how did you cope with, like, did you then go on to, like, learn the language? So what language do the Swiss speak?
So Switzerland is a funny country. They have 3 to 4 national languages and then multiple dialects per region. So Schweizerdeutsch is the Swiss German language. There is a Swiss French language, which is closer to
Huh.
French. Schweizerdeutsch is it's quite different to High German or Hochdeutsch. And then there is an Italian Romanish part as well.
Right.
So Switzerland, you can actually be very Swiss and not be able to communicate with other people in
Funny.
Switzerland for a
Yep.
tiny country.
Yep.
There are, yeah, it's quite a lot of languages.
Mm.
But yeah, I learned the language. I would say, I was passable. But then what I found when I got to the Netherlands is my Dutch has a bit of a German accent, so
Right.
which wasn't welcome.
No.
So it's quite funny. The different, it's like us in New Zealand, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Oh, definitely. That's a very good way to put it.
yeah.
And I guess going from Switz there, what was which company was it you were in Switzerland
Wholesome,
with? Wholesome.
wholesome.
So after Wholesome, where'd you go from after that
So I
again?
stayed with Wholesome and I
Wholesome.
moved to the
Okay.
Philippines to run operations. So the Philippines was one of I think it was the third biggest company within the Wholesome 80 countries of companies.
Wow.
That's a bit of a
Yep.
tongue twister.
Yep.
So what I ran there, we had four big operating plants from one end of the country to the other, 10 in total, plus a bag manufacturing plant, 40 warehouses, 64 domestic vessels, about 4,500 trucks, and 8 million tons of break bulk imports. And we were operating in what's called a sold out market. So we were producing cement as fast as people were taking it out the pack house. Um, amazing, amazing opportunity. The Philippines is just beautiful. The people are incredible. But there is an underside to that. I've had guns pulled on me by fairly senior people.
Yep.
Particularly I had to introduce anti-bribery and corruption in my third month there.
Right.
Let's call that a big learning exercise. One of my ships caught on fire because the Port Authority wouldn't dock it because we hadn't paid whatever it was we were supposed to pay, even though we'd done an amnesty and done an explanation. Um, so you learn rapidly how to work
Yep.
in a local,
Yep.
local way.
So building that reputation and obviously your long resume, because how many years did you end up doing with Wholesome? Wholesome?
Yeah, in
Yeah.
total, 12 including years that I was directly contracting to them, 7 direct.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess from that point there, were you looking to expand your career from there? Is that when you got the next job opportunity?
No, so what happened with Wholesome was they went through a merger with a French company called Lafarge. And I'd been in the Philippines coming up to 4 years, and I was part of Wholesome sort of on a development path through Wholesome, which I loved. And honestly, I loved Wholesome. It was fantastic people. You had a network the whole world over. So while you were, in running a country, you were also part of many, regional councils or broader, and then quite good connections back with the corporate head office. So I absolutely loved Wholesome. And they then went through a merger with Lafarge, which I think broke many of our hearts. Two very different companies, all with their merits, but trying to mash together two extremely different corporate cultures. And it was a lot of change. And what also happened was many of us got letters saying, we know you're ready for your next move, but you're going to stay where you are, because they had twice as many people as they needed for the top country positions.
Right.
Right. So it had to be an incumbent that got the role under a lot of the French social process, which is the way, they're governed. And so I was faced with a decision at that point. So, it's, the two boys and I in Philippines on, do I stay for another 4 years or do we go? And look, the Philippines is not for the faint-hearted, and it's a country where you see every day abject poverty. The church is very heavily involved with the
Mm.
running of the state, and people have different opinions on that, which is fine. And a lot of just different living challenges. And my boys were coming up. They were what were they? They're 9 and 11. And it was kind of at a point where I thought, they're forming who they are at this point. And I felt it was probably time to go somewhere more familiar as let's call it a first world environment. They did see, as much as I tried to protect them, they did see things there that you sort of think, okay, it's just normal here, but it's not normal for where you are for your life. Great experience, and they'll tell you they just loved it, and, we really did, but it was time for a change, and so from there, we moved to Singapore, and I joined Maersk, Shipping in Singapore, and actually, I've been really, really lucky. Maersk is a beautiful company. It's a really well run. the way, it was started over 100 years ago, that Mollusk McKinney, he was the family values that have come through the business is still really, really present.
Mm.
So, you do feel part of the company, and they do create opportunities for people to give their best and move. So, I was really lucky to go from a company that I loved but was feeling sad about into a company that I could really love. So I got very lucky there.
It's really good being exposed to that third world country environment. I feel like a lot of us take countries like Australia, America, parts of Europe for granted.
Mm.
Um, I say it every time, like I've said on so many podcasts, but when I went to Bali, like just being exposed to
Yeah,
that environment and you're going through the streets and the sewage just
yeah,
run beside
yeah,
the road, you can't drink tap water, like just the basics for living,
yeah,
is still not accessible for those people. So it's definitely an eye opener and makes you appreciate what you have a lot more.
yeah. The value of human life is a funny thing, and the values and where we place value in human life is an interesting thing. I arrived in the Philippines during I think it is still a fairly one of the biggest floods they've ever had. So we're talking 6 meters of water just washing through, and people still live in shanty environments, and you see them, and this is where I just love the Philippines. They're neck deep in water and their whole life is just washed away. But if they see a camera, their first instinct is to go, hi. And they're just, the other thing about the Philippines, and none of us can say this, I can assure you of that, everyone there can hold a tune. And I was in a work meeting, and they always have karaoke. It's just a big thing. And so I can say about my singing. So when the boys were little, I'd sing if they were crying, and they'd stop, but everybody else would start. So
Oh, right.
I'm a shocker. And so you get into an environment, and here we are having a lunch at work, and we were launching our new strategy, and they just start passing a microwave around, and they can hold a Celine Dion song and move the mic between people, and it's seamless. I mean, I think as a country, they're incredible, and they really know how to share. So everything in the Philippines begins and ends with food.
Mm,
So they love their food, probably a little bit too much sometimes. So, deep fried bananas covered in sugar and syrup at 2 o'clock, or you have
right.
ensamada for morning tea, and that's after rice for breakfast. So, yeah, finding your way to eat a salad is important if you're going to live there.
Yes, for sure. So being in Singapore, you almost did the complete flip from, and
Mm.
it's crazy how close they are together. Like, because
Yeah,
Singapore borders Malaysia, I believe.
yeah, it does. Yeah.
So it's kind of a big flip going from Philippines to Singapore,
Mm.
probably one of the cleanest cities in the world. Um, I guess even what was that experience like being in that environment, being around those people? Was a lot more professional, and you feel like everyone's.
Yeah, I found Singapore a little bit, probably a little bit more difficult. Met some great Aussies. The thing with different cultures is some will really fold you in. Singapore is a little harder, and I think that's because they've had just such a transient expat base for a very long time that come and go with the finance industry. What's interesting about Singapore is it's one of the only countries I know of that has gone from being a third world country to a first world country in one generation.
Mm,
So that, and to be the prime minister there, you have to be successful in business. So they kind of have this, you can't just get people that we know, who you see in other countries who are not successful and maybe don't have the best ethics can make it. It's quite strict like that. There is obviously a heavy Chinese influence. That's their origin and their heritage. But Singapore is a very safe place to live. So the kids have gone from living in a gated compound with, security living in our area, in our house. We had a, driver. I'm not allowed to drive in the Philippines. To a country like Singapore where they're just completely free. And so the boys could catch a train in to see their friends, and that's very normal, which was really lovely. And I think they needed that at that point. They could walk to school again. So it was all a very easy place to live. But you only have to drive 1 kilometre over the bridge to Johor Bahru, and your car will be stolen in 2 minutes.
oh
So,
wow.
JB's got a real reputation in Malaysia. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
true.
it's yeah, it's different.
It's funny like that. I guess Singapore. While we're talking like how big businesses in Singapore, part of
Mm.
their economy, and you being involved in all these major global companies, how how big is ego? How much does ego get around, and how have you dealt with it?
Yeah, that's a funny thing. I think I mean, everyone has an ego, right?
Mm,
So, but what I did find is I think, and I've lived the same experience myself. I actually have to say, I'm quite fortunate that for me, it was in Switzerland where, um, you fit in or you go home. And the Swiss don't make it easy, but they don't make it hard either. So, if you're going to be there, but be there, really embrace it and be part of it. Um, Countries like Singapore and its first time expats that I probably struggled with the most, who come from mid level anything into an environment where they feel like a big fish in a small pond, but you're not really. And you get help that lives in at home. So people sort of go from, a normal suburban Australian existence, look at it that way, into feeling like they're something that potentially you're not. You're just really another part of the fabric. So um, I found that hard, and in many cases, I was the only working mum. So,
yep.
generally, there's a few. It takes a while to find them, but generally, women go as what we call the trailing spouse in expat. And I think many of them are really well educated and struggle a bit not having their own role. And I met some wonderful women who are still lifelong friends now. But I also came across some that I thought, oh, okay, this is not going to be there. And that was harder actually than probably the work side. Generally, most multinationals at that level where you're working in we call it a regional head office, so Singapore is a big one. People know what they're there to do. The pace is pretty frenetic. The expectations are high. You know what you need to deliver. So there's a lot of focus on how you pull together to do that. Certainly in Wholesome and in Maersk, it was really good in that regard. So not too bad.
I guess that's another thing too, being a female in business. Like, we're very fortunate in recent times that females being definitely a lot more accepted and recognized for their different skills that males
Mm.
can't harness at all. Almost, I guess, what's that been like for you? Again, being CEO and COO of these massive global companies, have you found that a lot of people misjudged you and, in a way, undervalued you purely because you're a female, not a male?
No, so this is where no, I've had it on sailing more so than I've probably had it at
Right.
work, and I think I've been quite lucky because my roles have all originated from being merit based, so you kind of have a name and a brand, and people know
Yep.
why you're coming through. So in that regard, I have to say it's been pretty good. I've had a couple, there's always a couple of moments. One of the worst things that ever happened to me, but this was my fault. I went to a meeting in Switzerland and there was 19 men and me, which was pretty normal, which is fine. But the Swiss greeting is 3 kisses. So it's 1, 2, 3, so one each side. And I'm quite small, and
Right.
some of the guys that were there weren't. And there was one guy, and we just didn't get on. And I think we'd both recognized very early on we weren't going to be best mates, and that's okay, right? It's fine. Anyway, I walked into this meeting and he was there, and we were doing the 3 kisses thing, and just I don't know what happened, but I cocked it up and we ended up kissing on the lips in the middle of this whole thing in front of everybody else. And I was like, oh, just kill me now. Anyway, you just have to be able to just laugh, right? And that's one thing Australians have. So, yeah, every now and then I sort of went, oh. But I will say for women who are there, I get a bit frustrated. Create opportunities for others. So my hallmark of my career is for every woman that I hire her because she's good and she's the right candidate. But it's good to create the opportunity and pay it forward. So you've got to create opportunities for others and bring talent through. And that's how you start creating networks, but keep the expectations. It's well known that for men, you'll put your hand up if you're only half formed, right? So say you have 3 of the 6 job criteria, guys will generally go, yeah, I'll give it a crack. Whereas women will try and wait till they've got the 6. So understanding that fairly early started over the years to sort of go, okay, we know, she may have some development areas. Let's surround her with the right support system so she can be successful. So there's women get what's called glass cliff jobs. So one of my CEO roles was a glass cliff. So it's a job that no man would have taken. And you have to make a very conscious decision there and decide what you're going to do with it. And you do have to swim a bit harder in the beginning. But, I had men that worked for me that were 20 years older, industry veterans. I was brand new to freight forwarding. And they were amazing. So I understood what I brought to the role and then leaned on them for their expertise within the industry. And that's a key thing, is knowing you don't have to have all the answers, but knowing how to work with the team that you surround yourself to get the best out of them so that you can deliver what you're there to deliver. And that's, you don't always get it right. But that's probably the greatest learning I've had is, how can I leverage expertise and experience? But I know my strengths are connecting the dots. My strengths are that I'm decisive, and my strengths are giving people that clarity on where they're going and what they need to contribute. And then you let them go do it.
Ok, having those veterans in industry, like work, you're working with these veterans that 20 years older. Sorry, was it they were 20
Yeah,
years
yeah,
older
yeah, yeah,
and probably like 40 years in industry
yeah.
themselves. I can imagine all of them would have been a mentor to you in many different ways. So, how do you become the perfect student, would you say, and be able to ask them the questions and the right questions too? And when do you ask them those questions?
Yeah. So it's pretty constant. So it's all the way through. You're having morning coffees with people, going for, a walk at lunch. You pick a lot more up there than you do in formal meetings. The other thing is I often knew what decision I needed to make, but I wanted to just sense test it and also just fill in the blanks to know that substantively that was the right decision to make. And we were making some pretty big decisions, that are hugely impactful, not just to the business and our customers, but also our people. So involving people in that process and involving them early. Um, it's a funny thing. I found I get the best out of people anecdotally first, through just kind of sounding boards. And then you have the meeting where you can start to bring it together. There's a lot of people, and I have to say, I see it in Australia, and I don't know when this happened here. A lot of people take the right of veto, and very few want to take the right of accountability. So, and that's become a real hallmark of business, which I find very saddening. And it's easy to sit in a meeting and go, no, no, no. And people want to assert their authority by being the one that can say no to something
Mm.
rather than taking accountability and saying, well, how do we make this work? And how do we bring people together to deliver on this? And I think that comes a little bit back to your ego point, which genuinely tends to be more insecurity than, people that are truly comfortable in their skin will go, right, here's a job. How are we going to do it? How do we work together? How do we make it happen? And then it is very much a we. And, the team I had in the Netherlands, one of the best days of my life was going and doing the Viking Challenge. So this was a team, and we'd had nights where we were up to 2, 3 o'clock in the morning trying to get this business, which had never performed, to perform. And we would be working all hours, and we'd be back there early in the morning. And you're still a parent, you're still a spouse, you're still many things. One of the guys who is one of my most favorite people in the world is a preacher in his church. He has 5 children, and that was his primary primary passion. But the amount he gave to me to be able to help make this work, I just adore him. We always had a bet whether I'd get him to have a beer or he'd get me into church first. So we ended up settling on having a beer outside the church. But he was an amazing, amazing person. And we ended up getting the team who'd just been to hell and back together. And it was really tough. And we went and did this Viking challenge, and you're in mud up to your neck. You've got to run through obstacles, and it needs a team to get each other over the obstacles. And the feeling that we had when we'd finished that, we'd literally been through the trenches together. And they're people that for the rest of my life, you pick up the phone and say hi. Actually, so that was, how long ago was that? 6 years. And that same group, all of my country CEOs, we still chat regularly on WhatsApp. We still have that chat going. So that's team. That is stuff that you walk. That's what you want to go for work to work for.
It's good having those connections for life because if you ever need, you could say something in the future, you can always have someone to buzz
Yeah,
or question.
And look, I'm still creating opportunities. There's people that were part of that team that are so talented. And when I get phone calls saying, "Do you know anybody who would be good for this role?" I'm like, "Absolutely." And you need to talk to this person.
Mm,
And that's what makes the world go round.
and how much has networking been a part of your career?
Oh, it's all of my career. I'm very careful to nurture and take care of my networks. I think there are so many people that have contributed to where I've gone in my life in a number of different ways. And I think it's really important to keep that circle going around. At the end of the day, a job is a job. It's a contract where I give 40 hours and I get a paycheck. I mean, that's what all of us get out of bed every day at a base level for. But I think everybody listening would have to agree it's the people you go to work that either make or break whether you want to be there or not, and what you
100%.
bring to your day job.
100%.
Mm.
Network, like for someone wanting to start out networking, what tips would you give them who want to build, who may not have the connections and they're very early on in their career and they want to get to a level that you've possibly achieved? And then what events are you going to at your level to even create that more global connection?
Yeah. So I think networks are a bit misunderstood. So people do go into them, and I see this a little bit going, what's in it for me?
Mm.
And then the people on the other end feel used and, don't want to be a part of it. And I think the whole mentoring thing got a bit lost there. So particularly, in mentors for women, and it became this, well, you're mentoring me, where's my next job? That's what you're supposed to get from me. And that's not what it is at all. So the networking is very much understanding people around you, understanding what they're doing, and finding ways to support it. Finding ways to be a part of it. So how do you contribute? How do you help people meet other people? And that connectivity is what builds a network. So knowing someone who is well, I'm just coming from a railway business at the moment, but from people that are involved in wanting to set up a new rail terminal to knowing somebody else that's really good in ports infrastructure and then introducing them. That's networking. So it doesn't have to be about you, but you'll always be a part of that connection and that network and what that goes on to be. So networks for me are very much how do you contribute and support. And, when you do need something, it'll be there for you, but that's not the reason to have one. It's very much, just getting to know people and just understanding how you can help connect the dots. That's a network.
And for global events, what are like some of the massive global events you're going to or have gone to build that global connection?
Yeah, mine, I'd have to say, has been more iterative. So most multinationals have conferences every year, and they're a big deal. They'll take the top 100 or the top 300, and companies I've worked in are sort of 80, 90,000 people. So you'll have those events. And you do get to know each other. I think for people, when you can participate on regional councils for companies, so we've got a lot of big businesses in the Gladstone region. You will get facilitators who'll come to do training sessions for companies. They've often come from really interesting backgrounds, so it's good to get to know them. And then it has to be quite selfless, like genuinely get to know them and get to know their story. There's a lot of big world events. You get at the top of the tree, you've got Davos. I didn't actually go in the end, but I think it's kind of lost the plot a bit. But my former boss actually runs now that whole Davos symposium, Alois Zwingy. So so Alois rang and said, could I mentor one of his executive MBA students coming through the World Economic Forum as a student? So I mentored her for 6 years and I still talk to her now, funnily enough. She's actually a Dutch woman. So, it's a funny little circle how the world works and how small the world actually is. But you have to be there authentically. And when you go to those events, genuinely meet people and get to know them for who they are. And that's the beginning of the network.
Mm. One thing I did see is someone mentioned when you go to networking events, don't try meet absolutely everyone who's there. Try
Mm,
focus on a group,
mm,
and try build a meaningful relationship than trying to
yeah.
build very minor relationships between everyone.
Yeah. Look, a lot of conferences are people coming and handing out business cards, getting a junket and going home and never thinking about it again. For people that have worked for me, I don't do so many anymore, but for people who work for me, if they go to a conference, which generally, sorry, is company sponsored, they have to take down all the main points. Who did they meet? But what did they see and understand there? And then they need to come back and talk to the rest of the team about it. So come back and talk about and use those connections that they've made for other team members who didn't go to the conference. And that made it a lot more active and participative in a constructive way, if you will. So we found that worked really well. So people would go, like Martin, who worked for me in Denmark. He's just an absolutely remarkably talented, young man, and he was really good on that conference circuit. And he was very good both at giving speeches, but also then in finding people that he could connect back in. We were doing a new operating system implementation with a company called Blue Jay. It's a very complicated system. But he was able to find people just by meeting them and talking to them who were specialists, and he knew one of his team had a gap in that area. So that's the connections he made. That's the real network
Yep.
at work.
Mm.
Yeah.
Coming back to when you were saying that you're connecting, say, someone who wants to start a railway site and
Terminal.
then
Yep.
terminal, and then someone who's involved in the port industry, you connecting those people, they're both, I guess, trusting your reputation that you're going to put them together. Say in the situation where that relationship doesn't work out, then it actually impacts your reputation.
No,
It doesn't, you don't
no,
believe? No.
because you're introducing them in good faith. So if they don't get on or they don't see a future where they work together, they're generally fine. So, no, I haven't had that experience. I think the credibility issue is if you highly recommend somebody for a job and they're not good,
Right.
and you let somebody down that way, and that happens. Um, yeah, your credibility. Why did you recommend that person? Because they were terrible and they've cost us X, Y, Z.
Mm,
So I haven't had that, but you do see it. And I have had a few lemon hires where I've taken somebody in on good faith and it's been not what I expected. And then you find out afterwards that the person who recommended them didn't know them that well, just knew they needed a job.
true.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yep. I guess reputation is a massive part of everything in life, not just
Mm.
business. Damaging your reputation, and in the unfortunate situation, someone actually tortures your reputation without you knowing. How do you recover that? And how long do you think it takes to recover your
Yeah,
reputation?
it's a really interesting question. I think if you're genuinely you, and you're known for who you are, it's pretty hard to dent that. Um, that said, everybody has a bad day. Everybody has a bad day. So um, I've found, if I've just looked back over things I've watched over the years, I think people that have deliberately set out to bring someone down are genuinely seen for who they are.
Mm,
So if you're that person that's been pillarized, the single best thing you can do is keep your powder dry, keep your head above water, and just keep doing your own thing. If you try and respond to it, there's a beautiful Mark Twain quote, which is never argue with an idiot. They just drag you down to their level and beat you with experience. So stay true to yourself, and try and just keep being who you are and work your way through. The people who know you best will back you and support you, and that's what gets you through. Um, I've just learned to ignore. There's been, yeah, more than a handful of people along the way who probably haven't had my best interests at heart, and that's fine. Like, not everybody likes everybody. My father used to say to me, he had really interesting little words of advice. One of them was borrowing is a slow form of theft, which is so true. But the other one he kept saying to me was take yourself out of the equation. In the beginning, I thought, what on earth are you talking about? I am the equation. And then I realized actually, when you can stand back and have a look at what's happening, you can be a lot more calmer and clinical about what's going on, rather than, being in the middle of trying to control a bushfire that's raging around you. Sometimes when you stand back, you realize it's a spot fire and you can just step on it and it's gone.
mm.
Mm.
I guess that's another thing too, like knowing your boundaries as well.
Mm.
So you don't step over the line, and then that also ruins your reputation because you've tried to exceed more than you can
Yeah, I
possibly
think
achieve.
I actually. So I think that's very true. So don't try and be something that you're not, and don't overpromise and
Fake it till you make it.
yeah, don't overpromise and underdeliver. But you do have to stretch yourself, and you do have to do that in a way where you're completely honest about it to say, "Look, I really want this opportunity, but I haven't done it before. So, bear with me while I'm on my L plates. How can you support me through this?" You can do that. I think where that does go horribly wrong is people go, "No, no, no," the old, "Don't tell me, I know boats," and then they definitely don't quite get there. So, and that just lets everybody down if you try and imply that you're something that you're not. But again, it's just that if you can stay authentic and stay genuine, you'll get so many helping hands along the way because it's everybody's success then. And
Mm,
that's where the real, there's people out there that feel it's me, 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 me. I have to, and it's terribly lonely.
mm,
When you can do it as a team, it's a beautiful thing.
100%.
Mm.
The celebration's definitely a lot more,
Yeah.
rewarding having a party with the team than opposed to yourself.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
So coming back to Singapore when you were with Haslo, what was your next step from there? Was that when you went to Demco or
Yeah, so Maersk had 4 global businesses
oh,
at the
sorry,
time.
Merce, that's
Maersk,
right, you
yeah.
were with Merce.
So I went to got moved to the Netherlands. So, this is back in the days where you get a phone call on a Friday and you start your new job in a new country on a Monday with kids. It's great. So we were pretty mobile.
You have
It's
to be very much like first principle thinker too, like
oh,
and not procrastinate. You just
no.
you just have to go with
Go.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So and that's back I've one of the things I'm known for is being decisive. And in being decisive, I don't always get it right. And I'm the first to put my hand up and say, right, that was my decision. I'm going to own that. Didn't quite work out. Here's where we're going now. And people respect that. People will go, yeah, okay, good. We gave it a go, or it was felt like the right decision at the time, and things have changed. What people don't like is making a decision or not making a decision. I mean, how many of us have worked in companies and it's like bloody
Mm.
nailing jelly to the wall? It's hopeless. And that is just inordinately frustrating.
Mm.
So, everybody wants to know what they're getting out of bed for and how they can contribute. And most people just want to do a good job and go home, right? People don't live and breathe their jobs, and nor should they. But yeah, so went to the Netherlands, and that was decisive. That was got a phone call. Here's the job. Are you coming? Yep. Okay. Broke one of my kids' hearts. He just loves Singapore, and that's the first time I had a real challenge in moving the boys. But to their credit, they got on with it. And so new school, new country, new language, new everything. And then, yeah, I loved being in the Netherlands, but I was working around the world. So lots of planes, lots of flights. And with kids, that's a bit tough. But the boys, I got amazing kids. So yeah, went to the Netherlands and was working in Copenhagen in Denmark every other week, I would say, as a rule. And it was tough. Maersk is the world's biggest shipping company. So for everybody who doesn't immediately know Maersk, they're the big blue ships that go around the planet. And I went over there to be part of what was called the Stay Ahead strategy, where we completely redefined a 100-year-old company. So we went from vessel utilization being the primary driver into how do we turn this business into something that's got 50 years of life in it. And that was really understanding the customer. And how did we then organize this company to be able to provide an end-to-end service for the customer? So Maersk was very decisive in saying we will be the global integrator of containerized freight, and very good at saying we will not be doing all these peripheral conglomerate businesses that we've had for years. So we sold the oil and gas business, we sold the containers business, we sold, I think, the wind farm business. So anything that wasn't core to that strategy went. And then when we implemented that strategy, we had to bring in huge new skill sets. So you've got a company that literally everybody who works there says you bleed blue. Um, so
Yeah.
everybody that bled blue, then all these people were coming in. So we had heads of Amazon come in. We had, some of the technical people. It was incredible. And then I got given the freight forwarding business, which was a core part of Maersk, but had never performed. So in strategy terms, you'd call it a loss leader. So Soren Sko was our group CEO at the time, and he said, "Right, Saskia, I'm going to give you this. You got 2 years, work it out, sort it out, tell us what to do with it." And hard work, I tell you what. I've got a passport photo that actually shows I'd been up till some ungodly hour, a- and we'd just found a big hole in the P&L and a publicly listed company. So We were going to market with a investor relations market statement 2 days later, and found this 60 million euros hole that we needed to sort of
Mm.
work through. And it was fine in the end, but at the time it was like, oh my God. And I had to go and get my passport done. And I had this beautiful passport photo that had been done in Asia. And so I walked into the passport office with this photo, and the Dutch woman said, she looked at the passport photo and she looked at me and she goes, "That doesn't look like you. You need to go and get a new photo." So I'm tired, time constrained. The weather is absolute shit. I've forgotten my umbrella. And she goes, "It's the photo booth is just around the corner." Well, that's 2.1 kilometers down the road in the rain, in heels. So I've got down there and I walked in. I was by now just not a happy camper. And the guy who takes the passport photos said to me in Dutch, "Well, normally I don't, I tell people not to smile." He goes, "That's not going to be a problem." And I have the most hideous passport photo. It is god awful. And I normally went through a passport a year because I was traveling so much. And now you either get e-stamps or, because of COVID, we stopped traveling. So I've still got this bloody awful passport
Oh,
photo.
far out.
But that was symptomatic to what was going on in this business. So anyway, the good news is we turned it around. We set 3 very clear objectives for the entire company, which was to improve revenue to gross profit conversion. It was our file management hygiene, so that you were booking all the files every day before you went home. And then the last one was to keep your customers close, but your network closer.
Mm.
We called those our 3 home runs. And we had a baseball, and everybody in the company got a baseball because we were using the Moneyball analogy, and everybody had to watch the movie. So we had a movie day and everybody watched it. And then what we did is, everywhere you went around the world, you signed each other's baseballs. And that
Cool.
was about building the team. And you had a player card that talked about who you were. And we turned that business around in 8 months. So we were profitable after 8 months. And then in our second year, we maintained the same 3 home runs, because you can always do better. And what people needed was just calmness and consistency. And we kept it in the second year. And it became very clear to me then that the business didn't have a right to live. And it kind of had dawned on me, because I was a bit of a runner. I was out running in the sleety cold. It kind of kept dawning on me that if we are the global integrator of containerized freight, we shouldn't have what's called a fighting brand. It's confusing to the market. So I went to Maersk and recommended that we keep the profitable products that fit the integrator strategy and dissolve the rest of the business. Our engagement scores as a company had gone from 2.2 to 4.7, and you can only go to 5. So we had this incredibly engaged company that I was then essentially going to kill. Um, and the day that I announced that was in September. It was, we did a group wide, which what we would always done. We'd communicated so well and really built this team dynamic. And what shocked me was everybody understood the decision. So it was one of the hardest decisions I ever had to make. And the support we got back from people for having made the decision that so clearly needed to be made um, was immense. And that for me was just one of those moments of, I don't know what I expected, but I didn't expect that. And it really was a great lesson in the power of strategy,
Mm.
the power of sticking to your plan, and being able to give people a clear plan on what are they working towards. Because we said to everybody, if you're not working on one of those 3 home runs, you're spending your time on something that doesn't matter. Save it for another day. And so the just intense focus. And it was hard for us in terms of discussing it with the executive board of Maersk, because they're saying, well, your business is profitable. Never has been before. And I said, it is, but for it to really work, we need 100 million investment, and it's going to compete with the integrator strategy. So it would be far better. And that's, for everybody, no one wants to make the hard decisions. People don't want to take that accountability and go, this is the decision that needs to be made. And when we did do that, the respect you get for making that hard decision is immense. I didn't expect that. I actually thought I'd be really criticized. But it was the right thing to do, and nothing changes that. So,
How do
yeah.
you block out any distractions that may put you off the path of the strategy you're going with?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think when you've done your homework, you've got to reassess all the way. So, you're out there and you're in the weather, so you have to make the best decisions you can, but you still got to know where you're going. And sometimes you adjust slightly how you get there, but you've still got to be very clear on where you're going. Um, Generally, if you've put the effort in and people are aligned behind it, you'll get there. I think strategies fail when you get a group of consultants into a room and you form the strategy off to the side, and then management comes in and goes, ta-da, here's where we're going, and
Mm.
everyone goes, what? And then you get this outwit, outlast, outstay mentality where people are like, I'm just going to put my head down and just do my thing. And then they white ant it from the inside out because they don't believe in where you're going. So when you can create that belief system, you can achieve anything. But you've got to be clear, and you've got to be able to have sense checked the fact that the problems you're addressing are the problems that needed to be addressed. And people will tell you, people know, in any business on any given day, people know what needs to be fixed. What drives employees nuts and what really denigrates engagement is when they can see those decisions aren't being made. And then you see, executives off on long lunches or whatever and love-ins, and people hate it. And I totally agree with them. As a leader, you have an accountability to create a work environment where it's clear what people need to do. You set performance expectations. And if people don't reach that, then they shouldn't be there. And not everybody needs to be happy working for you. Sometimes people are going to be happier outside the business doing something else for someone else. And I think, Australia's just about made it impossible to do that. So we've got a lot of toxic people circulating who are just genuinely unhappy and would be far happier doing something else. And as your leader, that's your goal. You have to set a clear path. You have to set the performance expectations, and you have to administer them, and you have to hold yourself to that standard.
It's one
Mm.
of the many. It's probably the most important thing when it comes to having a successful company. Is giving people vision of what they're actually working towards.
Yep. And with performance management, it's a carrot and a stick. People who put in the big effort can't stand it when they see somebody next to them just coasting through. And as I said to you earlier, everyone has a bad day. So, people have personal lives and stuff's going on. But by and large, being able to foster that work environment where everybody knows you need to bring your A game, and, back to wholesome, Swiss run, I can tell you, you got one get out of jail free. If you weren't good enough, you weren't there, and everyone knew
With lost it.
it.
It's on top of my mind. Hopefully it comes back to me real quick. We are just talking about yes. So when you have your bad days, what are strategies that you put in place to almost like overcome them or think them through to come out stronger on the other side?
Yeah. Having had many, many bad days, I've got better at it over time. I would say early in my career, I did have a little bit of a, oh, poor me.
Mm.
Why is this happening to me? And then I think it was, a little bit, my mum and my dad have been amazing on just drumming into me, okay, you are where you are. What are you going to do about it? And everything's a choice. And I find it a little bit hard at the moment. There's a real culture of everybody being a victim. Everybody wants to be a victim of
Mm.
something. We own our choices. Nobody makes you do anything. Your response to any given situation is your choice. And I think we don't speak enough about that. And, you see domestic violence, you see all of these sort of things that are terrible. They're choices. Nobody makes anyone do anything. You can walk away. And it's the same in a work environment. I think for people, learning to self-advocate is very important. So bad days tend to be consequences of someone's bad decision, right? And sometimes bad days are just shit happens. But for me, usually I'll try and disengage. So if something's not going particularly well, I just put it down and walk away. And whether I just take the dog for a walk or just go for a run, just switch it off. I do say to people I work with, look, I'm not getting anywhere with this right now. It's going to be an extra 2 days. I'm going to come back to it, but I'm not solving it right now. Or I'll ask for help. I'm up against a brick wall here. There's something that's just not gelling. What am I getting wrong? And ask for that. Get that feedback. People go, can you give me feedback? But what they want to hear is, oh my God, you're so amazing. The real feedback is, look, you missed the point here. That's the stuff that counts. And you can actually go, oh God, actually, that's really valuable. Thanks. And you can be better. So being open to getting that feedback and then doing something with it, or just giving yourself a break, have a Kit Kat.
Yeah. I definitely find that exercise is the best way to try to find a solution.
Mm,
I find that even like people are like, oh, just maybe even going for a sleep. Like I know many met, like I think Thomas Edison when he was about to give up
Mm.
on the light bulb. Sorry, that's a different story. It was a musician that couldn't find. He was trying to make the music notes for water in his
Ah,
instrumental and couldn't figure it out. And then he went for a walk in the forest, fell asleep, and in his dream, he dreamt the notes,
yeah.
wrote the notes, and then became. I think he was one of the most successful musicians of all time.
Mm.
Albert Einstein used to walk a lot when he couldn't figure out
Yep.
um, math problems or physics equations. And I guess when it comes to me, I find like lifting weight or going for a run,
Yeah.
like you mentioned, it's just the best way to take your mind off the game for a bit, focus on physical health, and then you find that you get that light bulb moment, and you
Yeah.
come back to it.
Do you know what's a little bit crazy too? Is nobody switches off anymore. And I'm a bit guilty
Mm.
of this myself. To do a lot of the like half marathons and stuff in Europe, you weren't allowed to wear earphones for a long time. You had
Right.
to run without music.
Mm.
And it teaches you that really being present. And so Peter, you met. So we were talking, and he's really big on being fully present with the people that you're with. And you look around, everybody's on their bloody phones, and you see kids that are, and you lose that ability to have free thinking time. So I've just taken swimming back up after all these years,
Right. Yep.
and I love it because you are just swimming, so you're alone with your thoughts.
Focusing on technique and.
Yeah, well,
Mm.
half a mine "Oh my god, I think I'm gonna drown," but, um, by and large, being able to have that just clear thinking space is
Mm.
so underrated, and we don't give ourselves that space. I'm here talking about sailing, we'll nick off next Friday. We go away for a couple of days on the boat, and we go somewhere that there is no one else, and the world stops, and it's so peaceful. And that's when you do your best thinking. If your mind is just constantly cluttered and you've got things that are binging and dinging and people have this compulsion to pick up and look at crap that's fake half the time,
Mm.
you're never going to really get there. You never really connect with your best thoughts and your best functionality. And, speaking of bad days, I had this one, it's probably the worst day of my life for a whole range of reasons. And I went for a run. And it was about 6 o'clock at night in the Netherlands, pitch black, snowing, and it's sleety. And cold. And the thing with running there is you get hot really quickly. So you don't want to overlayer when you leave, and you don't want to be underlayered either because you get cold and then you're wet. So it's a real art to get what you're going to wear right. And I just had this day, and I was angry, like really angry. And I thought, well, I don't want to sit with the kids at dinner feeling like this. And I went for this run, and I just like ran it out.
And you
And
tend to run faster too, eh?
yeah, yeah, you tend to run
Yeah.
faster, absolutely. And I came home and I got in the kitchen, and I was still sweating. I thought, right, I'm going to get ready for dinner, and I'm going to sharpen this knife. And I was sharpening the knife, and I thought, no, I'm coming back out. I'm going for another run.
Yeah.
And by the time I got back that time, it was pretty zen, but
Yeah.
it just takes that out. And that was my choice. Either, people that sit there and then infect everybody else with their bad mood. I mean, what does that achieve?
Mm.
And that's back to being this victim. Oh, look at me, I'm having a bad day. Well,
Yeah.
okay, whatever. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, it's definitely something that the victim mentality is definitely. I feel like everyone feels it when they're younger too. Like when you're a kid, you're always the victim. And when kids actually are trained to do that because they're rewarded, like when they cry, they get picked up and looked up.
Mm,
And
mm.
unfortunately, I feel like a lot of people take that into their adulthood where they feel like if they
Yeah.
become the victim, that people are going to
Well,
come and
right
like
now, I think
reward
we've
them.
become a country of lushers. But
Mm.
yeah, I mean, there's no resilience. Yeah.
So and what I've come to terms with is like, listening to other people on podcasts. We're one of 100 billion people that have existed on planet Earth. So when you think of that, you're quite very insignificant.
Yeah.
As much as your life is important, you're also very insignificant.
Yeah.
And it's the most, I think it's the most pleasing thought because it just gives you room to just like, I don't matter, but that's awesome because if I fail, who cares?
Yeah.
You know?
It's not gonna
Mm,
define your whole life.
yeah.
Another one of my dad's most beautiful sayings was, "It's a new day, go make it count."
Mm.
Mm.
I guess like just being able to shrink, like there's that video where it's the house and it zooms out, it's the town, it's
Yeah,
the country, the
yeah,
earth, and then the solar system, like just how small your problems are. Like,
yeah. In the grand scheme of things,
mm,
I think there was I can't remember his name, the astronaut who was in space, and he looked at Earth, and he said, "It's just a tiny planet. Why are we all trying to kill it?"
Mm.
And I thought it's a very good question. And it's just so easy to be nice. It costs you nothing to be nice. You watch how people drive, and there was a thing on the other day, that clip about that people that got into a big Barney and Rocky after a drive-through at Kentucky Fried Chicken. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Really?
Just
Like 2 minutes
it's
for somebody else
unfortunate.
to go in front of you, and really? And it's just, but that's that everybody at the moment, and I think just disengaging from social media is such a healthy thing in many regards.
Mm.
Um, you know, we've got this whole environment spending money that people don't have, buying things they don't need to impress people they don't like. And then you just lose yourself in that entire process,
Yeah.
right? So you're so busy trying to impress somebody else. And actually, if you're listening, you think about a nice car or you think about a nice handbag, you'll never remember who was driving it or who had it, right? So who cares?
Yeah.
Mm.
It's very funny like that, eh? Like you see, you do see nice cars and they're like, oh, like what people think I'm cool, but like, even when I see a nice car, like, that's a nice car. I don't think about the person driving the car.
No.
I'm looking at the car.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And it's nice to look at, but they're a bitch to drive and they're horrible to insure. So,
Mm. Yeah, and the tax too.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
definitely a pretty penny.
Yeah.
In terms of that, like being so living so international throughout your life, I guess what is probably would you say your favorite country in terms of
Oh,
like for living in that
yeah, hands down Australia. And I have to say,
Australia?
yeah,
Wow.
hands down. I was so grateful to come back. And, we had through COVID, I didn't come back to Australia for 3.5 years. So I hadn't seen my family, my mum in particular. And being told you can't come home was really confronting. And really, I just couldn't get my head around the fact that I couldn't go home.
Mm.
Um, and it was what it was. So you can't, it's another Danish expression, you can't dance faster than the music. Um, but just being back, the lifestyle that we have here, by and large, Aussies are just such a great bunch. I've always loved Gladstone. I still call it home. I love coming back. You always feel sort of wrapped up in a bit of a cuddle, and it's beautiful. We are so lucky how beautiful Australia is, and there are beautiful places all around the world.
Yeah.
But it's on our doorstep every single morning of every single day.
Mm.
It's incredible. So, the food here, the coffee here, Australia is, and sometimes it's home is where the heart is, and it's what you know. And I've been really privileged to be able to see pretty much, I guess, most corners of the world. Um, but yeah, Australia is just, there's nothing like it
That's
anywhere.
awesome to hear.
Yeah,
That's
there
really
is
awesome.
nothing like
I
it
guess
anywhere.
which state then? If
Yeah,
you
oh, yeah,
really
it's got to
get
be Queensland, right?
Queensland? Yeah.
Yeah, no. Although I just sailed into Sydney Harbour, um,
That's something.
right, to sail,
Mm.
and I've been to a lot of places with my boat, and I had Maud on board, my co-skipper and my partner Pete, and just coming in together under the harbour bridge was, yeah, it is a bit of a
It's
pinch me moment. Yeah, so that was uber cool, and it was a shitty rainy day, but it was still great.
It's still good, yeah.
But it's up there when we finished the Brisbane to Gladstone with Celeste, and it was a real thing. I bought her in Finland, and that was the final part of the journey, was to bring her into Gladstone.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've seen the photos, but so many people came down to welcome us in. The
Oh,
dock
that's
almost
awesome.
broke.
Oh,
So
really?
there's a photo, and I got hit by lightning, or had a lightning pulse above the boat, which just destroyed all my electronics on the first day of that race. And I rang the insurance company afterwards, and Declan, who was working for Pentanius, had seen the dock photos. He goes, "Are you ringing because the dock insurance?" I said, "No, I'm ringing for my boat." So he'd seen the photos as well. That was just an amazing moment. So, and actually Gladstone Harbour, sailing into Gladstone Harbour is sensational. Mm.
It's definitely, yeah. Again, I feel like I've taken Gladstone for granted a
Yeah.
lot over my life.
Oh, yeah. I bet that's normal too. But
Mm.
it is a pretty special place.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've got to try finish your story. So you were in Netherlands. Korea, where you were in your career. So you were in Netherlands
Yep.
with um,
Musk.
Maersk. What was the next company from there?
Yeah, so I was getting moved to Denmark, and it was just right in the middle of my kids' schooling, um, for Flynn finishing his IB,
Yep.
International Baccalaureate. And I was starting to think about the fact it was time to come home. And Flynn, he's 20, going on 21 now, right from when he was a tiny little boy, all he ever wanted was to join the army.
Oh,
And
wow.
originally he was hoping to go to Sandhurst in the UK because he hadn't really lived in Australia. but they stopped taking Commonwealth entries. And so he reverted to Australia. And to apply to go to ADFA, you had to be on Australian soil. So I started thinking, okay, it's probably time to go home. And CRH is a very well known and respected cement and concrete company. So back to my heartbeat. And they said, look, we've got a business in Australia. It's pretty small compared to stuff that I've done. But if you want to go and have a look at it and turn it around, wasn't profitable. Um, go and run that. I thought, yeah, right, yeah, that was great. So had an absolute ball with that. So came here, we turned that around in 4 months or something. Just getting rid of excess inventory, getting people focused and getting systems and processes in place. Most business problems are actually the same. So I had a really lovely team who worked with me there. They're still going great guns. We wrote the strategy for that business. They have followed it to the letter. It's now a very big business, which it was always going to be. So it's with them for just under 2 years. And then, so worked with them first, running Australia from the Netherlands because of COVID. And then I joined Pacific National, so it's Australia's largest rail freight, for the opportunity to work under Paul Scurrah. And then Catherine Livingston is our board chair. So she's very, very well known on the Australian, very, very well respected as well. So that's been an amazing experience. And came in through a succession plan for Paul, but I want to go sailing. So in 4 days' time, I stop work for at least a year.
That's awesome, and that's what I want to finish with is your passion for sailing. Like, remember you telling me, or I don't know if you told me or heard on the commentary, but your dad put you in the dinghy when you were 4 years
Yeah,
old and sent you
pushed
off,
it. Yeah,
and from there, that's where that
yeah,
became part of your life.
yeah. And I was always, there was never many girls sailing. There was two of us for a while in Gladstone. Melissa Mann was the other one. And the boys didn't really want to sail with girls back then, but I grew into 125s and from sabos into 125s as everyone does, and then onto yachts, and did a lot of sailing with Tony Orgel on Shearwater, which was just a ton of fun, and with Scotty Patrick on Wistari, who is an excellent sailor, and one of our other crew members is a guy called Tony Craner, who's now down in Brisbane. And I sail with him a bit. He's got a J99 that he campaigns really well. But it's always been a part of my life. Everywhere I've lived, I've had a boat. But the boat that I always wanted was the Swan. And Marika Barker actually sort of put the idea in my head when I was a little girl. And hull number one came up for sale when I was in the Netherlands. And I thought, this is it. This is my boat. There was actually another one for sale just down the road. And I never even went and looked at it. Isn't that bizarre? And so I flew up to Finland, and she was in a winter shed, no rig, no test survey, no test sail, nothing. And they're all things you're supposed to do when you buy a boat. Bought it on the spot and just fell in love with her, and went up 3 months later when the ice melted, and literally the next day started sailing 1,500 miles home with two teenage boys, one of who probably didn't want to be there, but it was an amazing, amazing, 5 countries, just sensational experience to have with the kids.
Yep, you could definitely. Jordan mentioned that when you can part when you can't remember how you put it, but pretty much when you have sailing in your life, like everything else is just stress free.
Yeah,
It's a lot more simple.
it's sailing is like nine-dimensional chess. So you do a passage plan. So you're planning your route, but you're looking at weather, you're looking at currents, you're looking at depth. You got to get the boat set up. When Maud and I go in March, we'll be 6 weeks offshore without stopping. So planning our route, planning our food, planning our water, planning our shifts. It's really constant, and the boat needs a lot of nurturing because that's all you've got, right? So
Mm,
if you don't look after that, you're going to the bottom.
yep.
So it's an amazing skill set to have that keeps giving, and you never stop learning. You simply never stop learning, and that's what I love about sailing.
Yeah,
Mm.
100%. And you were saying you do so 4 days you can start sailing, but I know you mentioned you're doing the race from Melbourne to Osaka.
Yep. Yeah. So we'll do it at the end of November. Maud and I'll take the boat to Sydney. So that's 400 miles. And then we'll do Cabbage Tree Race, which is up to Port Stephens and back. That's the
Yep.
qualifier for Hobart.
Yep.
We're doing Hobart two-handed. I think there's 23 two-handed entries this year.
Wow.
So in Europe, it's been popular for years, but it's a new thing here. That's really gaining some speed. And Hobart for us is a delivery trip. So we need to do the race because it qualifies us to do Osaka.
So when you say Hobart, you're referring to Sydney to
Sydney to
Hobart.
Hobart, yeah, yeah. So Boxing Day will be trundling off, and then yeah, on March 9, which would have been my dad's 80th birthday, we sail to Osaka. So we should get there somewhere mid-April.
And where do you go from there? Because obviously you're in Japan, so you're gonna have to come home
Oh, so
eventually.
that's yeah, I don't know. I really don't know the answer to that. So when you open a map, and Peter is a super yacht captain, so he's been around the world already, and he's a prolific sailor. So there's pretty much nowhere he hasn't sailed.
Wow.
And so yeah, so I open the map and go, "What about going to Alaska?" And he goes, "Oh, the Aleutian Islands are amazing. We should totally go." And then he says, "Oh, well, by the time we clear into Dutch Harbor, come down the Canadian coast, we can leave the boat at San Francisco. Or we could punch south and be there in time for the Transpac, switches to Hawaii." So, look, at the moment, the whole planet's open. I don't know. We'll probably, look, if we're being logical, we'll come back to Australia via the Solomons and the Marianas and so on New Guinea. I'd say it's going to be fairly temporary, and then we'll head off again. So,
Yeah, I'd
mm.
love to have to get Pete on a virtual podcast one day
Oh,
because what he
absolutely.
was saying,
His background is incredible.
mm, like he had his time in Monaco there. He was
Yeah,
saying, well,
yeah. He's worked for some pretty amazing people running some pretty amazing boats, but he's a Targa Tasmania. He did 10 Targa as a driver, race driver. Yeah, he's had a pretty was in America's Cup campaigns early on, and he was 17 when he got sent over, and he's a boat builder. He's building some big boats, 28 meters. So which he keeps making longer. But yeah, he's a super interesting guy.
yeah, I'd love to. I feel like I could go on and ask you questions for days, but I think we might
We
because
have to
we're
be.
we're limited for time.
Yeah.
Potentially, if you want to do a second pass virtually in the future,
Yeah, love
I
to.
mean, you're doing a sailing, so I might have to get you before you go
Yeah.
to Japan. But if you were to wrap it up with, I guess what I've been doing is asking people for their wisdom
Mhm.
for not only business but life
Mhm.
to anyone, whether they're a female wants to get into business or anyone, just anyone.
Yeah.
What life advice would you give them?
Life is short. Make every day count. It costs you nothing to be kind, and put your hand up for every opportunity that comes your way.
Love it. Awesome. Thank you, Saskia.
Thanks, Lockie. That was fun.